I'm most likely not the first to admit how completely ridiculous this franchise is, or the first to question how the hell they even made any money out of its own absurdity, but to be honest, that's kind of what I enjoy the most about this franchise. It is absurd, it is ridiculous, and it is bloody. It is bloody, disgustingly stupid, but it's a fun kind of disgustingly stupid in all senses of that word. The Final Destination franchise pretty much created all the rational and irrational fears that we all seem to learn about death as a whole. When it comes to flying on a commercial airline, or riding a roller coaster, or going to NASCAR, or driving on a bus across a bridge. It created a community of people that couldn't get over those fears, and it's created even new ones that people wouldn't even think to be fearful of. And that's kind of what makes these movies entertaining, even if they are pretty dumb at times. Although I can say the opposite of that for the newest Final Destination movie that came out this weekend. Being the only difference between the new film and the older films, with the first few films, it consisted of a lot of deaths and a lot of brutal moments with characters that we couldn't give less of a shit about, to be honest. And we didn't really like them as much, and we were just waiting to see them, except for maybe like the main character, maybe. But for the most part, they've all been pretty unlikable. With the newest film, not only did it have likable characters, and not only the deaths were extremely brutal, even more brutal than the previous films, but it also has some clever storytelling and set pieces to go along with it, as well as an emotional monologue / eulogy for recent late actor Tony Todd. And it actually gave us a bit of substance, more so than the original films, which I didn't really expect to see. And with the many references that were happening from those previous films, it got me started thinking about that always seems to be on people's minds every time this franchise is ever brought up. You know what I'm talking about. It's the opening scene from Final Destination 2. So a little bit of a spoiler warning from the most recent Final Destination film. If you remember the opening scene where they go to the Sky Tower and they say that they built the thing 5 months ahead of schedule, ready to make its grand opening. Of course, eventually everything falls apart and then kills everybody, or at least in the premonition. That level of negligence actually came from the second movie, which again was referenced a lot in the newer film, because it kept mentioning the log truck thing, which also popped up a lot, and that came from this film. But the level of negligence in that film is very similar to what happens in this film. Of course, if you have a check engine light that pops up under your car, you immediately get that checked out. But for some reason, her friend is encouraging her not to check it out, as if nothing's going to happen, and just smiling it off as if it doesn't matter. And we also have a truck driver who's drinking while driving a truck that has beer in it, that has a sign that says drink responsibly. And of course they shame the guy for doing all this irresponsible stuff right as she finally decides to put on her seatbelt while she's already driving. I never saw that line of irresponsibility in my entire life in a film, or just in anything. That's just downright ridiculous. And then there's a guy doing drugs, because why not? We need one of those assholes in these movies. And then we see a bunch of randos that are just being shown on camera that are just there to die. And finally we have the cop, who for some reason has a full cup full of hot coffee with no lid on it. Why would you do that to yourself? I mean, it probably came from like the break room, maybe, like at their police station. But do they not have lids? Do they not have lids to close the thing in so that it, doesn't spill? That's literally the whole point, because coffee's pretty fucking hot. So why didn't you put a lid on it? Like, that's gonna spill on his lap. I mean, it's not gonna cause him to crash or anything, but he'll get distracted by the logs that for some reason can bounce on concrete floor and then just go right through his windshield. And now we get to the moment we've all been waiting for: the destruction. People dying and stuff, very brutally and mercilessly. Honestly, pretty awesome to see. What's extra impressive with this scene is that all the blood effects, like every single bit of mayhem, is all done practically. Most of everything is pretty practical, from the blood effects to the explosions to the crashes. Everything is done 90% without CGI, which is actually all pretty impressive. If you look behind the scenes, it's all done pretty well. But it also brings out the rational / irrational fear of driving on the freeway, which is why I take the surface street to work. My point is, there's a reason why people always remember this scene whenever it comes to Final Destination. It turns irrational fears into somewhat rational fears. And that's kind of what makes this franchise so famous. Even if it is ridiculous and absurd. It kind of leaves you to wonder what else could happen if death was around the corner and you just didn't expect it to happen. But I think that's kind of the point of these movies. It's coming when you least expect it. It is a little silly at times where you can expect it and you know what's going to happen, but at the same time you don't know when it's going to happen, and then it happens. You know, that's kind of how death works. And that's just kind of what these films are. It's kind of a silly version of expecting the unexpected. And I guess this is kind of what makes them fun to watch in the first place, even if they are pretty silly. Even if you don't even watch these films and just watch the latest one that came out, I think you'll still have a good time. And if you watch every single one of them, and you'll probably have a good time too. There's really no specific order you have to watch these films anyway. All it is just really a fun time. It's nothing really anything to be taken seriously. And you know what? I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But don't worry in terms of these things actually happening to you if that's what you're worried about, because trust me, I don't think death is going to be this fucking cruel.